Hello everybody, it's me, Bunny, and today we're going to be reading Have an Official Blessing, Chapter 9. This chapter, just like last chapter, is going to be quite a long chapter, so please get your hot cocoa, your coffee, your popcorn, everything ready, because we're going on for a long ride on this one. I'm pretty sure chapter 10 and 11 are probably going to be shorter, but this one's going to be quite a long one. I kind of skimmed over it, and yeah, it's quite a long one. But yeah, before I start reading, let me just give my typical disclaimers. I'm going to try to do it as fast as possible, so that way you're not here for like 18 years. But yes, first of all, I have affiliations with MXCX or with 7Cs. There is an official audiobook. This isn't it. This is just girls who wanna have fun. Just gal pals is reading for funsies. Some of the is that I'm not fluent or anywhere near competent with the Chinese language, so there might be names, places, or any of the words that I may mispronounce. I'm not doing that on purpose. I love the language. I just happen to not speak it. And tres, even though I do speak English, that is not my native language, and I may not be that well reading it. Why am I reading in English? Who knows? Pero yeah. But yeah, I may mispronounce some words. I'm not doing that on purpose. Like I said, I know English, but it doesn't translate that well for reading. But with that being said, let's just jump straight into the reading because that's what we came here for. Let's begin with chapter 9. The more adamant the mud face was, the more alarmed Xie Lian became. Everyone stand back. Don't go near him and don't listen to a single word he says. The crowd dispersed in panic. The mud face continued to chuckle. Don't leave. There's no need to be like that. I'm a human too. I won't hurt you. Oh, you're mistaken. You look nothing like a human, Xie Lian thought. Just then, something unexpected happened. One of the merchants snuck back toward the field, probably thinking that he still had to bring back some herbs for the wounded. But when he bent down to pick up the ferns he had dropped in fright earlier, the mud-face twisted and spotted him, and with a glint of its spinning eyes. Oh no, Xie Lian thought, rushing towards the man. Don't pick that up! Come back! But it was too late. The mud face opened its mouth and a long red thing slithered out. What a long tongue! Uh-oh. Xie Lian grabbed the merchant by the collar and tussled backward with him in tow, but the tongue that flew out was freakishly long and forced its way right into the merchant's ear. Uh-oh. Xie Lian felt the body in his grip convulse violently. The merchant's limbs wriggled non-stop, and the man let out a short, agonizing scream before falling to the ground. That long tongue dug out a large chunk of something bloody from its ears and brought it back to the mud-faced mouth. The mud-face happily chewed and chuckled its laugh so disturbingly loud it filled the entire palace ground. Ha 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 ha! So good, so good, so delicious, so delicious, so delicious! I was so hungry, so hungry. His voice was sharp and shrill, his eyes bloodshot, horrible and disgusting to the extreme. This man who had been buried for over 50 years in the ground of an evil-filled kingdom had already been molded into its soil and became something other than human. Xie Lian loosened his grip on the deceased merchant, his entire arm shaking. He was about to shriek in repulsive monster when the must face screamed again, General! General! They're here! They're here! A defeated cry was savage then that of beast echoed in the distance. A dark shadow dropped from the sky and landed heavily in front of Xie Lian. The entire palace ground quaked on its landing. When it slowly stood up, its enormous shadow enveloped the entire group. This man was truly too big. The face was grim as steel, his expression ferocious and turbulent like that of a beast. He was at least 3 meters tall, clad in leather armor on his shoulder and chest. Rather than a man, one could say he was more like a walking wolf. Behind him, more and more similar forms appeared. One, two, three, over 10 of those men jumped off the roofs of the palace and surrounded them. Each of those men was large as a horse, built like a beast with a sharp tooth-covered mark on his shoulder. They might as well have been werewolves. When they circled around the intruders in the garden, it was like a large steel cage had fallen upon them. The soldiers of Banwei. The soldiers emanated a dark aura and were undoubtedly no longer alive. Xie Lian was tense and held Royer in position, ready to attack. However, when Banwei's soldiers saw them, they didn't rush to kill them. Instead, they raised their heads, and roared with a crazed laughter, howling in a foreign language. The sound of their words were ghastly, guttural, and heavy with tongue rolling. This was the language of Banwei. Although it had been 200 years that Xie Lian had pretty much forgotten the language, he did review it with Sanlang earlier in the general's tomb, and the words uttered by these soldiers were loud, simple, and vulgar, so they weren't difficult to understand. He heard the soldiers call the first man General. Their conversation was filled with phrases like "take them down" and "won't kill for now." Xie Lian took a deep breath and forced himself to relax. He said in a low voice, "Everyone, don't panic. These Banyu soldiers won't kill us for the time being. It seems they want to take us somewhere. They don't do anything rash. I can't guarantee I can beat them in a fight. We'll figure this out as we go." It was clear that these soldiers would be hard to fight, each of them rougher than the next. Even with Roye in hand, suffocating one would probably take a bit of time. Never mind 10. With mortals with them, Xie Lian couldn't do anything bold and could only remain vigilant and protect them the best he could. Sanlang didn't say anything, and the others had already lost their nerve. Even if they wanted to do something rash, they wouldn't know how, so they could only nod tearfully. Next to them, the mud-face screamed again, "General, General, please let me out. I detained your enemies. Let me go. I want to go home." Seeing the Banyan soldiers, the mud-face became hysterical, screaming and crying and blabbering nonsense with some Banyan words mixed in, no doubt learned from the many years he spent buried here. The massive 3-meter tall man they called General seemed to find the squirming mud-face deeply disgusting and swung his mace toward it. He smashed the face into a bloody mess, the teeth of his mace piercing the brain. When he pulled the mace up again, the entire body was pulled out with it, fulfilling his wish to let me out. However, the body that was unearthed was not a full human body, but a chilling skeleton. The merchant screamed in terror. The mud-faced bloody after crumbling off its mace seemed to also freeze in fear after seeing his own body. He sucked in a sharp teeth. "What's this? What's this?" "It's your body," Xie Lian reminded him, seeing that the mud face was numb in disbelief. It was easy to figure out. The man had been buried in the desert for more than 50 or 60 years. His body had fertilized the Shanwei firms until they cleared him from his flesh and left only bone. "How can this be?" His mother's face cried. "My body isn't like this. This is not my body." His voice was incomparably stiff, and he was horrifying and tragic sight. Xie Lian shook his head, but Sunlight sneered. "Now you're not used to your own body. What was that thing that came out of your mouth earlier? You didn't think that was odd?" The mud face countered immediately. "That wasn't odd. It was just a tongue. That's a bit longer than average." There was nothing but mockery on Sunlight's face. "Yeah, sure. Just a little longer than, right?" "Yeah, let's go with that." "That's right," the mudface cried. "It's only a little bit longer. It's just because I spent decades trying to live off insects, forcing my tongue to extend. That must be how I got to be like this." When he was first buried in the ground, perhaps he was still alive, and in order to survive, he had done this his best to extend his tongue to get eat flying insects and creepy crawlies. Then, as he gradually became less and less human, his tongue also became longer and longer, and the food he ate also moved from insects to much more terrifying things. However, because he had been buried underground for so many years, unable to see the state of his body, he was unable to accept the truth and refused to believe he was no longer human. The mud face kept trying to argue. There are plenty of people who have long tongues, not just me. Suddenly smiled and Xie Lian felt a chill watching him. This huge smile really gave off a sense of cruelty, like he was on the verge of ripping off someone's face. He would never do such a thing. He's so innocent, Ubu. Do you think you're so human? Someone questioned. The mud face felt a sense of danger in the question and suddenly became agitated. Of course I'm human! I'm human! The mud face screamed and tried to move his white bony limbs all at once, as if trying to crawl away. Finally unearthed, he was mad with joy, cackling. I'm going home! I'm going home now! Crack! The Banyu general finally had enough of the monster's shrill cry. In a split second he crushed the bones in one stomp, killing any more of his cries of "I'm human." After trampling the irritating mud-face, the general roared at the soldiers. The Banyue soldiers all raised their maces and growled at Xie Lian's group, started herding them out to the palace. Xie Lian walked up front with Sanlang still following close. Despite despite being ushered by ruthless Banyu soldiers, the youth's stance was still light and casual, as if he were as he were taking a stroll. Xie Lian had been hoping to find a chance to talk to him, and after a while, when the Banyu soldiers went back to the conversation among themselves, he spoke to San Leng in a lower voice. Those Banyu soldiers call their leader general. I wonder who it is. As expected, when he posed the question, San Leng still answered. At the time when the kingdom of Banyue fell, there were one only one general. His name translated to Camel. Camel? As in milestone? Xie Lian wondered at the odd name. That's right, Sunling said. Apparently it was because he was awfully weak when he was young and was often bullied. He railed and built up his strength by training with large milestones, which is why he got his name. So then couldn't resist thinking. Then he could have just as easily been named Dali from Braun. Sunlight continued. Legends have it that the Kemo was the strongest warrior in history of Banre, 3 meters tall and extremely powerful. He was a loyal supporter of the state preceptor. Even after death? Is he taking us to Banyu State Preceptor now then? Xie Lian asked. Perhaps, Tyler replied. If there were more Banyu soldiers there, how could they escape? Who knew how Nanfeng, who had lured the others away, was doing? The Shanjue fern was in their hand, but how were they going to deliver the ferns to the wounded within 24 hours? Xie Lian contemplated as he walked and soon noticed that General Kemo was leading them to a remote place at the far end of the city. When they stood and Xie Lian looked up, a colossal yellow carven wall stood before him like a giant. Their destination was the Sinner's Pit. Although Xie Lian had lived in the Banyu era for a time, he'd rarely gone into town and had never gone near the Sinner's Pit. Seeing it this close, Xie Lian's heart started pounding for some reason. The yellow earth walls had a set of stairs along the outside. While they slowly climbed the crude stairs, Xie Lian scrutinized the pit and tried to look with his human eyes in the depths until he finally understood why his heart was pounding. It wasn't because of thoughts of how this was a place of torture and cruelty, and it wasn't his worry about everyone getting pushed in. That was also a worry, but that wasn't the main one. He was feeling the palpitations of a very powerful ray at work. Someone had purposely set up an incredibly powerful array using the Sinner's Pit surrounding terrain as a structure, and this array only had one purpose: prevent the fallen from ever resurfacing. When that what that means was even if a rope or a ladder was sent down into the pit, whoever tried to climb from the bottom up would get cut off and halfway up and thrown back down. Without outwardly showing his intent, Xie Lian used the wall as its support to climb up the stairs. After walking for a stretch, he determined the material of the wall. He discovered that while it looked like it was made of earth, it was actually incomparably hard stone, probably enforced with a layer of magic. It undoubtedly be very difficult to break. When they reached the end of the stairs and came to the top of the pit, standing along the wall's eave, the only word to describe the sight was awful, that it inspired awe. The whole of the center's pit was formed by four great walls surrounding it. Each wall was over 100 meters long, over 60 meters high, and over a meter thick. The structure standing solidly tall at the top of each wall, there was nothing, neither gazebos nor drilling. Within the enclosure, there was a deep abyss without a bottom in sight. With the growing night, there was only because blackness and a chilling smell of blood wafting up from below. No one dared look down while walking along the rail less ease tens of meters above the ground. After a while, they could see the pole that stood in the center, and attached to that pole was a hanging corpse, the same one they had spotted before. The corpse was a small black-clad girl, her clothing tattered and her head bowed. Xie Lian knew that the pole had been used specifically for hanging criminals that deserved shame and humiliation. The prison guards would usually strip the criminals of their clothing and hang their bodies naked. The criminals would die from starvation or dehydration, and after death the corpse would be left to flail in the wind, scorched under the sun and not in the rain. When the corpse rotted completely through, it would fall into the pit itself. That sort of death was an exceedingly ugly sight. The corpse of that girl didn't seem to be rotten, so it must not have been long since she died. Perhaps it was a local girl that the soldiers captured. What a cruel and vulgar thing to do to a young girl. Azao, Tianchen, and the others faced blanked blanched at the sight, and paused in their stopped in their steps, afraid to go forward. Camel didn't force them onward either, but turned to the pit and let out a long cry. I don't know if I should be posting this image. It's not super graphic, but it is of her hanging. Not by the neck. Thankfully, it's more like the rope is around her her torso. Um, but um, I will be putting a trigger warning for this video. At the beginning, you probably already saw it, for mild to like quite descriptive gore. They don't, for the sake of purposes of not triggering anybody and not being that person, I will not be posting images. Oh, at least this image. Um, I feel like it's too strong to be posted. I'm very sorry. I normally do like sharing the images with you guys so you guys can see what I'm seeing, and if they have like really cutesy pictures or whatever, I feel normal. I even posted the image of I forgot his name, with the many faces disease, but this image right specifically, I feel like I don't feel safe posting it, so I'm very sorry. Like I said, I don't really love sharing the images, but this one I just don't feel like it's appropriate to be sharing. But just know that there is an image, and if you have the book, I will warn you right now. If you're following, yes. But hopefully you're well aware. But yes, I will put a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. I should have mentioned that earlier, but I'm noticing it now. Hopefully I remember. Actually no, not hopefully. I will remember. I'm gonna post that before, like at the beginning, like trigger warning, gore, and that. It's getting very gory, like very gory right now. So like I just wanted to say that. But yeah, back to the reading. Why is he yelling? Xie Lian wondered, but his question was soon answered. From the bottom of the dark pit there came wave after roars in response to the cry, like predatory beasts, like monsters, like tsunamis, hundreds upon thousands, defeating, deafening to the ear. The walls trembled with the noise, making those standing on the caves lose their balance. Xie Lian could clearly hear rocks and debris falling within. Only criminals were thrown into the sinner's pit. Were those the souls of the criminals entering Camel? Camel roared again, and Xie Lian paid more attention listening this time. Camel wasn't making meaningless noise, and he wasn't cursing either. Instead, he was giving encouragement. Xie Lian was very sure he heard the words, "My brothers." After roaring, Camel turned to the soldiers watching Xie Lian and the others and scouted another command. Xie Lian understood. Camel had said, "Just throw in two and detain the rest." The others might not have understood what was being said, but the intent of the soldiers was not hard to guess. Everyone looked pale as ghosts. Xie Lian saw the couple couldn't even stand upright amongst anymore, shaking from fear. He stepped forward and said in a small voice, "Don't worry, if anything happens, I will go forward first." So Lian thought that if they all must fall, he might as well be the first one to check things out. It couldn't be worse than venomous snakes and beasts and menacing ghosts. He couldn't die from the fall, from getting beaten from bites or poison, so you know what, as long as it wasn't lava or fire or some pool of course dissolving water, it shouldn't be too terrible when he jumped down. Besides, he had Royer with him. Even if he might not be able to escape the array, he could still use it to catch the others who fell after him. Camel had said, "Detain the rest," meaning the more of the others should be safe temporarily. After all, it wasn't easy hunting for prey in the Gobi Desert, so they should savor the time. You should savor them instead of eating every one in one go. Shilian's mind was clear, but who knew there was someone next to him who couldn't wait any longer? Ever since they reached the top of the sinner's pit, everyone, besides Sun Lung, who looked like nothing was out of the ordinary, was trembling, but especially Azao. He must have thought that if it was about to die, he might as well go down fighting. He clenched his fist and suddenly revolted. He went charging towards Campbell with his head down. The charge looked like Azal was ready to perish, but wanted to take Campbell down with him by knocking them down both into the pit. Even though Campbell was the bigger of the two, strong like a steel tower, he got punched back 3 steps from Azal's desperation. He roared in outrage and immediately threw the young man in. Everyone started screaming when they saw Azal plunged into the dark abyss, and Shilian called after him, "Azal!" From deep within the bottomless pit there came a roaring cheer, and then sounds of cruel ripping of flesh like fierce ghosts fighting over a meal. It was easily understand from hearing those noises that the young man Azal would never survive. Sun Yan was dumbstruck by the development. He had been suspicious that Azal was a subordinate of the Banyu state preceptor, purposely leading travelers to the ruins. He also suspected that he was the one who was there. He was here 50 or 60 years ago. But then the young man ended up being the first killed. How could he possibly survive that jump? Could he be faking his own death? But now that they were all captured by the Banyu soldiers, if Azal really was the state preceptor's subordinate, he'd have the upper hand and could gloriously reveal his true identity. Certainly he didn't need to do anything extra like faking his own death before their eyes. It was completely meaningless. But then, why did Azal rush Camel? Wasn't that an equally meaningless death? Shenyan's thoughts were in knots again. While the Banyu soldiers decided on the next human to push down, Camel sized them up and pointed at Tian Shen. Another Banyu soldier opened his large palms and reached out to capture the boy. Tian Shen screamed in terror, "Ah! Help! Don't take me! I'm—" Without any more time to think, Shilian stepped forward. "Please wait, General." Hearing him speak, and in the Banyu tongue no less, shock appeared on Camel's dark-skinned face. "You know how to speak our tongue? Where are you from?" "I'm from the Central Plains," Shilian replied. He would have been fine with lying, and that he was also a citizen of Banyu, but that wouldn't have worked. With how rusty his Banjue dialect was, his life would fall apart from conversation with Campbell for too long. Besides, it was also obvious from his appearance that he was a man of Central Plains. The people of Banjue detested liars more than anything, so if Xie Lian lied was found out, the result would be much worse. Central Plains? Campbell questioned. Descendant of Yong An? No, Xie Lian replied. The kingdom of Yong An has long since fallen. There's no more Yong An now. But to those of Banjue, all those who came from Central Plains were pretty much the same. Relatives of the descendants of Yong An, the Banjue were annihilated by the army of Yong An. So the moment they heard that Xie Lian was from, well, Camel's dark expression flashed with rage. Many of the Banjue soldiers also started growling, cursing vulgarity at him. Xie Lian listened, but it wasn't much more than despicable, liar, and throw him down. Xie Lian couldn't care less, to be honest. Camel demanded, our kingdom disappeared in the Gobi over 200 years ago. You are not of our people. Why do you know our tongue? Who are you? Xie Lian couldn't help but steal a glance at the calm youth behind him, mentally hoping that if his lies fell apart later, maybe he could shamelessly ask Sunlight to save him. He cleared his throat and was ready to start jabbering nonsense when another series of enraged growls sounded from below. It seemed that whatever was down in the pit had finished ripping Azar apart, but they were still hungry for more and cried out to convey their thirst for fresh blood. Campbell waved his hand again, ready to have Tian Chen thrown over, so Xie Lian spoke up. General, please take me first. Campbell must have heard and Campbell must have heard anyone request to go first before. Oh, I mean, Campbell must have never heard of anyone request to go first before, and his eyes bulged like balls. He demanded in disbelief, "You go first? Why?" Julian couldn't tell him the truth and say it was because he wasn't scared. He thought for a second and came up with a logical answer. General, they are innocent passing merchants. There's even a child among them. Campbell sneered. When you're young and armed and alien in my kingdom, do you think we did not also have innocent merchants and children? The fall of the kingdom of Banmei was over 200 years ago, and since then, countless dynasties had come and gone. However, these were the dead of for whom time had stopped. Hatred and grudges would not fade with the with their changing times. Campbell continued, you're very suspicious. I will need to question you. You are not going down. Throw it in a different way. Throw in a different one. There was no helping it. Xie Lian was ready to jump off if all else failed anyway. However, behind him, Sun Lan stepped forward, and Xie Lian's heart lurched as he looked back. With his arms crossed, the youth was nonchalantly looking down into the dark, bottomless sinner's pit with intrigued air. This wasn't a good sign. Xie Lian called out, Sun Lan! Sun Lan looked over at the sound of his call and smiled softly. It's fine. He took another step forward and was teetering dangerously on the brink. Both Xie Lian's head and heart started pounding. He called out, Wait, Sun Lan, don't move! At such a height, at the very edge of the pit, the hem of the youth's red cloth danced in the night breeze. Sun Lan glanced at him again with a smile. Don't be scared. You come back here first. Come back here and I won't be scared, Xie Lian said. Don't worry. I'm just going to leave for a bit. We'll see each other again soon, Sun Lan said. Don't! Before he finished, the boy took another step forward, his arms still crossed. Then with a light leap, he instantly vanished into the unfathomed darkness. The moment he jumped, Roger shot out from Xie Lian's wrist and transformed into a streak of white trying to grab hold of the youth's form. Yet the plunge was too fast, and the white silk band returned dispiritedly without even a sleeve corner. Xie Lian fell on his knees at the edge of the wall and screamed, Sunlight! Not a single sound. After Sunlight jumped there was not a single sound.
Next to him, many of the Banyan soldiers started yelling instead, all dumbfounded and bewildered. What was wrong with today? In the past, they always had to catch their prey and throw them into the pit, but today their prey took turns fighting to jump down on their own, and when held back, they jumped anyways. General Campbell yelled for them to calm down. As for Xie Lian, when he saw that Royer didn't catch Sunlight, he didn't waste any time thinking before pulling back the silk band and taking a leap off the wall himself. But when his body was still in midair, he felt his collar tighten and he stayed in place. Xilian looked back. It turned out that the General Campbell saw him jump. He reached out and nabbed Xilian by the collar, preventing his fall. If you want to join me, that's fine. Best if we go down together, Xilian urged with his mind. And like a snake, Royer shot out once more. It wrapped itself up Campbell's arm and roped his whole body. Seeing that the white silk band was unpredictably deadly and spirited, Kano's veins popped and his muscles instantly swelled as he tried to forcefully rip the fabric tying him. Shalian was at it in pace with Camel when he saw something peculiar out of the corner of his eye. The corpse hanging on the pole suddenly jerked and raised her head slightly. The band of Banyue soldiers also saw the corpse move and started yelling, swinging their maces to attack it. But the black-clad girl somehow untied herself and hopped off the pole before speeding toward them. She saw she saw like a black wind blowing through. She was like a black wind blowing through the east, fast and wicked. The soldiers couldn't maintain their balance and were quickly swept into the sinner's pit one by one, screaming. Outraged, Campbell yelled extreme vulgarities at her, many of which were street slang that Chilean couldn't understand well, but he had understood the first words. Is that ditch again? The swearing ceased in the next moment because Shilian suddenly yanked Camel over to fall into the sinner's pit with him, into the inescapable sinner's pit. With while falling, Camel roared with such fury that it almost killed Shilian's eardrums. He had to recall Royer and give Camel a kick while he was to get General farther away from him, just to protect his ears. Soon after, he urged Royer to fly upwards to try to grab hold of anything that could prevent him from falling deeper, or to slow him enough so that when he hit the ground it wouldn't be too painful. However, the sinner's pit was formidably built and had an equally powerful ray at work. So not only could Royer reach higher, it also couldn't find anything to hold on to. Cillian thought he was going to crash and flatten like a pancake as he had many times before, when suddenly, in the darkness, there was a flash of silver. The next moment a pair of hands caught him lightly. Whoever it was caught him perfectly, as if he was waiting at the bottom just to catch him. With a hand across his back to grasp his shoulders and another under his knees to support his weight, he easily dissolved the devastating force of the fall. Cillian had just fallen from such a high place and with such a forceful stop that he was still somewhat dizzy and confused. He subconsciously reached out and held tightly onto the person's shoulders. "Sunlight?" he called out. It was dark all around and nothing could be seen, including the person holding him. But still, he blurred out the name. The person didn't respond, so Shilian felt around their shoulders and chest, hoping to confirm. "Sunlight, is that you?" Maybe it was because the stench of blood here at the bottom of the pit was heavy and disorientating. Who knew what was going through Shilian's head, but his hands continued to roam upwards until it reached a strong, hard Adam's apple. He snapped out of it in shock and immediately reminded himself, withdrawing his hand. "It's Sunlight, right? Are you all right? Are you hurt?" It took a moment before he heard the youth respond in a deep, low voice from somewhere very close to him. "I'm fine." For some reason, Chilean thought that his voice was curiously different from before. "Sanlang, are you really all right? Put me down." Chilean said. "No," Sanlang replied. Chilean was taken aback by the response. What was going on? Was there something on the ground? That pair of arms was still holding him tightly without any intention of letting him go. Julien raised his hands and was about to gently push him away. However, just as he laid his hand on Sunland's chest, he abruptly remembered how after he was caught from the fall, his hands had roamed and felt up and a the hard protrusion of the youth's neck. He quietly withdrew his hand again. Julien didn't know what was up. It had been hundreds of years since the last time Julien cared about being awkward, but now there was a voice in his head telling him that he better stay still and proper to behave himself. Just then, there was an enraged, sorrowful wail at a sharp voice from the other end of the pit. What happened to you? Those words were shouted in the Banyu language, and from this voice, it was the general camel that Julien had dragged down with him. Since he was already dead, the fall wouldn't have killed him. It was a violent crash, however, so he probably blasted out a human-shaped crater in the ground with him embedded. And once he climbed out, he started yelling, "What's going on? My brothers, what happened to you?" When he roared into the pit earlier from the top of the wall, there were hundreds and thousands of voices that shouted at his call, as if the pit was filled to the brim with angry, menacing ghosts. But right now and there, other than Camel's cries, Chilean could only hear dead silence. There wasn't even any sound of breathing or that of a heartbeat from Sandlang right next to him. Chilean breathed hitched, suddenly realizing what was amiss. That's right. Even though Juliet was pressed against Sunlight, he couldn't detect the sound of his beating heart, or if his or his breath. Campbell roared, "Who killed you? Who was it?" When Azal first fell, there was horrifying sounds of flesh being ripped apart, but after Sunlam jumped, there was no more noise. Who else could have done it? Campbell himself must have realized this, and he shouted towards them, "Killing my soldiers? You're dead! I'm gonna kill you!" Although he couldn't see, Shilian could still sense danger rapidly approaching and jerked. "Sunlan, watch out! Don't worry about him," Sunlan said. Still holding Shilian tight, he made a small side step and spun around. In the dark, Shilian heard a series of fine clinking sounds, pleasant to the ear and intense swishing here and there. Camel bounced to capture them, but missed the first time. He whirled around to lunge again, but suddenly easily sidestepped and dodged him again. Shilian's arms involuntarily climbed up Sunlight's chest one more and held on right to his shoulder, subconsciously clutching on at his clothes. But the arms carrying him were steady, even with all the spinning and sidestepping. The hold was still strong and secure. Shilian could feel something cold and hard on those arms that would poke at him ever so often, and was a little confused. In the endless blackness, streaks of shimmering silver flashed everywhere, and sounds of sharp metal slicing wounds into flesh were accompanied by Camel's angry roars. It was obvious that the Banyu general was heavily wounded by now, but as tough as he was, he refused to admit defeat and once again rushed towards them. So the Yan called out, "Roye!" The silk band answered his call and shot out a loud snap. Surrounded above them, Camel seemed to have been whipped high up in the air, then flipped and dropped to the ground. This fall made Camel roar angrily. "You two! Two against one! Despicable! You are gonna kill us! Who cares if it's two against one? Or despicable or not? Saving my life is more important, and I'll kill you dead first," Jillian thought. Sun Lung, on the other hand, only hummed a a mirthless snort. "Even one-on-one you wouldn't win. You don't have to fight." The last line was directed to Shilian, Shilian, and in speaking it, his voice was deeper with none of the previous glib, mocking tone. "All right," Shilian responded, but also prompted him, "Sanlan, why don't you put me down? I'll be in your way this way." "You're not in the way. Don't get down," Sunland said. "Why can't I get down?" Julian asked in spite of himself. This guy couldn't possibly enjoy fighting while carrying someone, could he? He didn't need to go that far to look down on his opponents, did he? Someone answered was only two words. It's dirty. Dot dot dot. Xie Lian had never imagined that would be the answer, and said with such serious tone. He thought it was a little funny, but also made him feel inexplicably strange, his chest growing slightly warm for some reason. I don't know. Who knows, mate? Why are you blushy, washy? It's good because he can't see you because it's dark, so just blush how you want. Shilian was only joking. Yeah, I lost my place. Yeah. You can't possibly keep holding me like this. I could, Sunlight replied. Jinna was only joking, but Sunlight's reply had no trace of humor. Suddenly, Shilian didn't know how to respond. While they were talking, Camel never ceased attacking. Both of Sunlight's hands were holding him firmly, but something else was keeping Camel at bay, whipping him to his defeat. While slowly backing off, he shouted, "That made you too!" He hadn't yet finished those words when a large boom sounded. A massive man fell to the ground, beaten to the point where he could no longer stand. Having heard this, Shilian said, "Sunlang, don't kill him. We'll still need to question him if we want to get out of here." Sunlang indeed stopped his attacks and remained still. I wasn't planning on killing him anyways. Otherwise, he would have had, he wouldn't have lasted this long till now. Then silence returned anew to the bottom of the sinner's pit. After a moment, Shilgan asked, "Sanlang, were you the one who did all this down here?" Even if nothing was visible in the dark, with such an overpowering stench of blood, such an aura of bloodlust and Camel's madness and rage, it was obvious what had happened down there. There was another momentary silence before Shillian heard Sanlang's response. "Yes." It was the expected answer, Shillian sighed. How should I say this? Shillian chewed on his words and organized his thoughts before continuing in an earnest tone. Sanlang, next time you see a pit like this, don't just jump in randomly. I couldn't even stop you. Really, I didn't know what to do. Sanlang didn't seem to expect that kind of response and was stumped for a moment. When he spoke again, he sounded a bit odd. You don't want to you don't want to ask anything else? What else do you want me to ask? Shilian said. For example, whether I'm human. Sanlang replied. Shilian rubbed his forehead. I don't think that's necessary. Is it not? Is it? It's not important whether you're human or not, Shilian said. Oh. Shilian crossed his own arms while being held in Sanlang's and replied, "Forming a friendship should depend on how well two people hit it off, and how well their personalities match, not their identities. If I like you, you could be a beggar and I'd still like you. If I dislike you, you could be the emperor and I still dislike you. Shouldn't it be like that? It's simple logic. So whether you're human or not is irrelevant." Sunlang laughed out loud. "Yeah, you're very right." "Right?" Shillian said, laughing along too. But the more he laughed, the more he felt something was off, and it came to him suddenly. He was still letting sunlight carry him, and the scary thing was, he had gotten used to being in this position without realizing it. This was gonna be the death of him. Shillian cleared his throat quietly and said, "Sunlight, we can talk about that later. Why don't you put me down first?" Sunlight seemed to have flashed a smile and said, "Hold on." He carried Shilian and walked on for a bit before gently setting him down. When Shilian was back on his own 2 feet, he could feel hard, flat ground. "Thanks." Sunlight made no gesture in response, and after thanking him, Shilian gazed upward. In the deep blue sky there hung a brilliant crescent moon, exceptionally beautiful. It was just that it was framed by a squared-off sky that made it feel like a fog stargazing in a well. Shillian tried urging Royer to reach for the top, but as expected, it only leapt up halfway before it was stopped by something invisible and rebumbed, unable to go higher.
There's a rain drown around the sinner's pit, Sanan said. I know. I just wanted to give it a try, Shilian said. I can't give up until I tried. I wonder how the others are doing up there. Will that girl in black also sweep them down?
He recounted to Sun Lang how the girl who was hanged on the pole suddenly escaped and swept all the soldiers down in the pit. While talking, he stepped on something on the ground. It appeared to be an arm, and Xie Lian almost tripped. He steadied himself immediately, but Sun Lang still reached out and helped support him, shouting, "Be careful. I told you the ground was dirty," Sun Lang added casually. Xie Lian now understood what dirty meant and said, "I'm fine. I want to ignite a palm torch, see what's happened down here, and go from there." Sun Lang didn't respond. Just then, from afar, Camel's cold voice bellowed, bellowed again. "You two doing the bidding of that bitch? The thousands of wronged souls of the kingdom? You'll curse you." Xie Lian turned toward Camel and asked using the Banyu tongue, "General Camel, who is that person you speak of?" Camel replied hatefully, "Why pretend to ask the evil cultivator? Hmm? Is it the female cultivator who roams the city streets?" Camel spat angrily on the ground, and Xie Lian took that as a yes, getting into question, "Weren't you a loyal supporter of the Banyu state preceptor?" Camel was provoked by his words and yelled, "I, Camel, will never again be loyal to her. I can never forgive that bitch." A long string of curses followed. Camel was hysterical and spoke rapidly and fast so fast that Xie Lian blanked out at the end, unable to follow. He quietly whispered, "Salang, Salang." And so Salang translated, "He's cursing. He said that woman betrayed his country, opened the city gates, and led the young army into the slaughter. She got the blood of the people on her hands and of his brothers, who she pushed into the pit. He will hang her dead 1,000 times, 10,000 times." "Wait, hold on," she then quickly exclaimed. "How could it be? There was two things that didn't match. First, that woman cultivator roaming in the city streets that Xie Lian spoke of earlier was supposed to be the lady in white, but now Kimmel was calling the Banyu preceptor bitch, and saying she pushed his brother into the sinner's pit. Earlier, when the black-clad girl swept the soldiers into the pit, Camel swore and cursed her with the same profanity. Plus, the last pit, hang her dead 1,000 times. Shilian suddenly realized that they didn't seem to be talking about the same person. Secondly, it was the Banyu state preceptor who betrayed the kingdom of Banyu. Shilian interpreted Kenmo, "General, the Banyu state preceptor you speak of, was it the girl in black hanging at the pole of the sinner's pit?" "Who else could it be if not her?" Campbell was Campbell, Campbell shouted. Dot dot dot. The scrawny corpse-like girl in black was the real state preceptor of Banyue, but if that was the case, who were the lady cultivators, her black-clad companion, who strolled through the streets looking to kill them? The girl in black had immediately strange powers and could easily sweep thousands of fierce, powerful Banyue soldiers off the wall. So how was she hanged above the sinner's pit? The story was getting more and more bizarre, more and more convoluted, and the more Shillian listened. "General, I want to ask." "No more questions," Camel interrupted. "You killed my soldiers. What else would you want to know? I won't survive now. Bite me." "I killed them. He didn't do anything," Sunlin said. "You can answer his questions and fight me." "What the?" Well, that was infutable logic, honestly. Campbell yelled angrily. "You're both here. You're both her helpers. There's no difference." She immediately said, "General Campbell, I think you misunderstood. The only person we've come to the Gami is to get rid of the state preceptor of Bangwei. How can we be helpers she's sent here?" Hearing that Xie Lian was actually there to destroy the state preceptor, Campbell fell silent. After after a while, he answered, "If you weren't helping her, then why did you kill my soldiers?" "Because you were going to throw us into the pit and we had to defend ourselves," Shelly explained. "Nonsense," Kim argued. "I didn't throw a single one of you. I even caught you. You all jumped down yourselves, you crazies." "Yes, yes, yes, we all jumped into the pit ourselves," Jillian said. "General, we're all trapped at the bottom of this pit. Let's just call it a truce for once. For now, at least. Alright? Why did that Banwei state preceptor open the city gates to let the enemies in?" As if Camel would listen to reason, he said resentfully. You two are despicable, fighting me 1-on-1. 2-on-1. Xie Lian felt a little exasperated. I really only smacked you once. I didn't do much. He didn't mind being called despicable or sly or whatever the situation called for, and never mind 2-on-1. He would bring 100 to beat one down. Who cared about fighting fair? But earlier, Sanlang obviously had the upper hand when even while carrying him, and he also told Xie Lian not to fight. Campbell seemed to think he would have won if it had just been him and San Lang though, and Xie Lian felt bad for him. Still, it seemed Campbell was the type who could easily be made to spill the beans. Xie Lian would just have to go slow, not a problem. San Lang, on the other hand, didn't have the same patience. He said leisurely, "You'd better answer this question for the sake of your soldiers." "You already killed them," Kimmel said. "It's pointless using them to threaten me." "They're dead, but their corpses are still around," someone replied. Kimmel grew alarmed, unable to remain sprawled on the ground anymore. "What are you planning?" "I don't know. It depends on what you do," Sanlan said. Just by his voice, Xie Lian could imagine the way Sanlan would narrow his eyes when he spoke. "Do you want their next lives to be fortuit for to be good, or to be reborn as a pool of blood?" Kimmel stopped, but soon understood what San Lang meant. The people of Banyue took death and funerals very seriously. They believed that, however the deceased looked at the time of death, that was how they would be reborn. For instance, if the deceased was missing an arm, they would be reborn disabled. If the corpse in the pit were destroyed, what would their rebirths be like? General Kimmel was a purebred man of Banyue, and couldn't help but be afraid, as expected on the other side of the dark pit. Kimmel gritted his teeth, sounding enraged. Then, after a while, he relentlessly, helplessly, "Don't touch their bodies. They were good, brave soldiers. It was already a tragedy that they were trapped in this pit for so many years. I don't know if being killed by you is a blessing or not, but I will not have their corpse humiliated further." He paused and asked, "Are you really here to kill Banyue?" Xie Lian replied warmly, "This is no lie. The more we know, the better chance we have of winning. Very little is known about the state preceptor of Banhui in the outside world, so we have no idea how her to fight her even if we want to. But you have worked under her before in the past, so perhaps you can enlighten us." Maybe it was because they shared the same enemy, the state preceptor of Banhui, that the sort of bond was developed. Or perhaps in the inescapable abyss atop of the dead bodies of his soldiers, Campbell became disheartened. Whatever the case was, Campbell seemed to have lost the will to attack them. "You don't know why she opened the gates and let those young men in?" "It's because she wanted revenge against us. She hated the kingdom of Banwe." "What do you mean she hates the kingdom of Banwe? Isn't the Banwe the state preceptor the person of Banwe?" Chilean asked. "Yes, but not entirely," Campbell replied. "She's of mixed blood, and the other half of her is Yong An." "Ah." As it turned out, Banyue's state preceptor was born of Banyue woman and a young man, living on the border where the people of the two nations share mutual hatred of each other. Things were different for a interracial couple. After a few years, the young man had finally had enough and moved away from the border back to affluent and peaceful Yong'an. Although it was an amicable
The
divorce.
Banyu woman soon passed away from heartache. They left behind a child 6 or 7 years of age. Without any guardians, the child grew up missing meals. The couple had received cold shoulders everywhere when they were around, and now their daughter also received contempt wherever she went. The people of Banyu were tall and brawny, and saw beauty and strength and liveliness. But this girl, she was born of mixed blood, and appeared small and scrawny among the Banyu children. She grew up bullied and became more and more sullen. The Banyu children wouldn't play with her. They were some young An children who did pay attention to her, though. When the little mixed blood girl was about 10, a riot broke out at the border of the two armies. The two armies fought out. The battle took many lives, and afterwards the little girl disappeared. She had she had neither friends nor family in Bangladesh, so no one really noticed or cared where she vanished off to. However, the next time she appeared, it was a different story. In those years, she walked thousands of miles and single-handedly crossed the Gobi Desert to Yongan. No one knew what kind of encounter she had, but when she returned, she had learned black magic, ooh, and could control a venomous creature more feared by the citizens of Banyue, the scorpion snake. Upon her return, many thought, although they were impressed, many were also afraid. That was because the girl's personality was never changed. She was still gloomy and unsociable. There were also many who bullied her in the past, so if she were to enter the palace and become a high-ranking official, wouldn't she only seek revenge against them who caused her trouble? Well, that makes sense, but yeah, I'm sure there were many who spoke poorly of her, Xie Lian commented. Camel humped. I didn't stop it. I didn't stop at all at ill. I mean, Jesus can't read. Camel humped. It didn't stop at ill talk. They went straight to the palace to advise the king, saying that she was an evil messenger sent from the Scorpion Snake clan, here to bring ruin to the kingdom of Banwei. But none of them succeeded. She got them hanged first. Xie Lian guessed. Camel was more disgusted. Sorry. You mean, you man of Yong'an, why is your mind so full of depraved and vile developments? There was none of that. I protected her. Xie Lian was exasperated. I already said I'm not from Yong'an. Alright, whatever. Just continue with your fucking story. Jeez. At the time, Camel was already a distinguished fierce warrior. There was an incident where he took his troops out to exterminate the nest of a band of desert bandits and brought the girl who had placed the palace's scorpions along. The group of bandits was strong, and they had built their lair below the sand. In the battle, both sides suffered casualties, and while Kimmel stole the victory, the battle caused the lair below the sand to collapse. Between that and the coming of wisdom, they couldn't stay. Kimmel retrieved with some soldiers, but the other group, which included the sorcerers, didn't manage to escape. Once they had returned to a safe point and waited out the sandstorm, Campbell returned anew, hoping to dig out the soldiers to bury them properly. Yet who knew that when he got there, he found that the sorcerer had, by her powers alone, dug out a sizable hole and managed to drag all the surviving wounded soldiers in to hide away from the winds. All the bodies of the dead were dug up too and laid out in a neat order. She had done this all by herself. When they got there, the soldier's body was stained with blood, but still she guarded the entrance to their hole silently, digging her knees and waiting for them to lime lone wolf like a lone wolf. After that incident, I thought she was a good woman who acted on principle, Kimmel said. I believed that she never had any intentions of harming the kingdom of Banwei, so I became her guarantor with all my might and fought against all the people who had those malicious voices. In addition, Kimmel himself had been bullied growing up and couldn't understand her strife. He could understand her strife. He paid attention the more he realized just how powerful this girl was. Thus, he endorsed her all the way, helping her reach a position of state preceptor, while he became the one later recorded as the most loyal subordinate of the state preceptor of Banwei. This lasted until another war broke down, and the kingdom of Yong'an sent armies to annihilate the kingdom of Banwei. With the two armies conflict, a lengthy standstill, she continued to she conducted a grand ceremony to pray to pray to the heavens, saying it was to bring blessings upon the Banwei soldiers. Campbell said, Thus, the soldiers' will to kill was whipped up, their battle spirits inflamed, and they defeated the city cages to the death. There were arrows, giant boulders, boiling oil, swords, and blades. The slaughter was endless and massive. Yet, unexpectedly, just as the fight was at its peak, the state preceptor suddenly opened the city gates. With the gates opened wide, millions of enemy troops swarmed into the city like mad. As the iron cavalry trampled past the entry wall, city instantly became a ritual of blood. Campbell, who was fighting hard against the enemies, went mad with rage when he heard that the state preceptor had opened the gates. But no matter how tough he was, one could not win alone against so many. Campbell gritted his teeth. I only learned right then that she had long been colliding with the enemy general and agreed to let their troops in at that moment. But even if I was destined to die in battle before I died, I was going to kill that traitor no matter what. So I sent a troop of soldiers to charge up the city tower, and we dragged her down and hung her dead over the sinner's pit, hung on that pole. After the enemy troop passed, the kingdom of Banyue became a dead realm. The state preceptor and the general who died in the battle also became trapped within the ruins, both keeping watch over the other in mutual grudge and hate. So, Xie Lian said, General Kemo, you led the Banyue soldiers under you to search for the shadow. Well, for that shadow. The state preceptor everywhere, and every time you capture her, you hang her dead over the sinner's pit? It won't be enough if we hang her dead 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, Camel exclaimed, because she's been apprehending all my soldiers who turned wrath and throwing them in the sinner's pit. She set up a powerful array around the pit that only she herself can break. Once you fall, you can never climb back up, and those of us who have been betrayed by her, those soldiers who died wrongfully in battle, hold a deep resentment that only developed devouring the flesh and blood of those Yongans can appease, and thus allow us to slowly pass from this earth with our hatred released. Otherwise, they can only howl into the long nights without absolution. Is that why you keep capturing people to feed them? Xie Lian asked. What else can we do? Kimmo replied. Listen to them wail down below and do nothing? The people you threw down, did you catch them yourselves, or we can't stray too far from the kingdom of Banyue, but thankfully her snakes like to hunt the area and often crawl out of the ruins and bite people. And caravans who suffer bites come into the city to look for the Shanyue fern. That mud face in the palace, was it you who buried him? That's right! The man buried in the earth was originally planning on stealing the riches of this place, but all the treasures of our kingdom they were cleared out by those Yong'an men 200 years ago. Why did you bury him instead of throwing him down there directly? Xie Lian asked. There's gotta be fertilizer to grow the ferns, Kimbo replied. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to hold the scorpion snakes back. We don't want to run into those creatures either. That's not right, Shilligan thought. If Kimball and his party consciously knew to grow and fertilize Shanjie firms, going as far as using live humans as fertilizers, then it was clear that even though they were no longer alive, their fear of those scorpion snakes was still strong. In that case, that fear must have been even greater while they were alive. If that Banyue state preceptor could control a murderous weapon as great as those scorpion snakes, then how was she so easily dragged down the city tower by a bunch of soldiers and hanged to death? According to Camel, in the past 200 years or so, he had captured the state preceptor over and over and hanged her dead repeatedly. Every Either way, Shilyan felt that if it were him, and he had such a killing weapon in his hand, he would never allow the enemy a chance to come near him. And regardless, scorpion snakes that would, you know, slither out of the ruins to bite people, was that an accident? Not likely. It was more likely that they were purposely trying to lure people into the pass. Then, was the Saberceptor doing so intentionally? Wouldn't that only be helping Campbell catch live humans to feed his soldier? Mutual hatred? That wouldn't make sense. Were they pretending to be enemies then? What was the point in that? And in all of this mess, there was also the mysterious lady in white and her companion. Xie Lian decided to ask more questions. General Campbell, when we first entered the city, we saw two ladies, one in white and the other in black. Do you know who they are? Before there was a response, San Lang whispered, "Shh." Xie didn't know what was going on, but he closed his mouth immediately. A strange hunch made him look back. It was the same framed dark blue sky with a crescent moon, but next to the moon he saw a person. A small black-clad silhouette was peering over the edge and looking down. After watching them for a bit, the little form suddenly grew bigger. It had jumped down. As it fell, as the figure fell, Xie Lian could clearly see that it was the state preceptor who had been hanging from the pole earlier. "Kimmel, what's going on?" the state preceptor asked in the Banyue tongue as she landed. The moment she spoke, Xie Lian thought her voice was very different from what he imagined. Although it certainly sounded sober, her voice was tiny. It was like the muttering of a sulky child. Not cool or powerful at all. If not for his, good hearing, Xie Lian might not have even heard her properly. "What's going on?" What's going on? They're all dead! "How did they die?" the state preceptor asked. "Isn't it because you pushed them all down and trapped them in this god-forsaken place?" "Who's here?" "There's another person," the state preceptor said. "There actually should have been two people at the bottom of the pit beside Camel, but Sunlight had neither a breath nor a heartbeat, so the state preceptor didn't detect his presence. It was also complete chaos on top of the walls earlier, and no one had kept track of who fell and who ran away, so she thought there was only Xie Lian. There's the one who killed all my soldiers. Are you happy now? They're finally all dead." The state preceptor was silent. Suddenly a tiny burst of light flared, illuminating a small black-clad girl conjuring a palm torch. The girl surprisingly appeared to be only 15 or 16. She was dressed in plain black she was dressed in a plain black cultivator robe, and her eyes were gloomy black as well. She was not unbeautiful, just unhappy. Her forehead and cheeks were covered in bruises, clear and distinct under the light. If it hadn't been confirmed earlier, no one would have believed that the state preceptor of Banyu could be such a pale young girl. The flames in her hand illuminated herself and her surrounding. At her feet were the armored corpses of Banyue soldiers. Xie Lian couldn't help but sneak a glance beside him. The palm torch in the state preceptor's hand was very small. It did not light up the entire pit, so they were still immersed in darkness. But, barring the small light, Xie Lian could still see the red-robed figure beside him. Perhaps it was his imagination, but although San Lang had already been taller than him before, he now appeared even taller somehow. Xie Lian glanced Shilian's gaze slowly moved upward and came to the youth's throat. He stopped for a moment, then continued upward, his eyes stopping at the elegantly shaped chin. The features of San Lang's upper face were still hidden in the shadows, but Shilian thought the bottom half was kinda subtly different from before. No less handsome, but the lines were much more defined, feeling he was being watched. Sunland tilted his head and his lips curled upward slightly. Perhaps he wanted so much to get a better look, to get nearer, that without realizing, Shenyan took a step forward to him. Just then, Keno wailed in the distance.
seemingly in shock after seeing the bloody tragedy before him. Xie Lian abruptly snapped out of it and turned to look and saw Kimmel clutching his own head. Despite the general's cry, the state preceptor's expression remained wooden and she only nodded. Good. In the midst of mourning, hearing those words made Camel rage once more. Good? What's good? What do you mean? Good. Means we're finally free, the state preceptor said. She turned to Xie Lian, who was still shrouded in darkness. Are you the one who killed them? It was an accident, Xie Lian replied. You're lying through your teeth, Camel exclaimed. Xie Lian responded bold-faced. Life is full of accidents. The state preceptor gave him a look, but her expression was ungrateful. Who are you? Her words were spoken in perfect Han dialect and weren't said in an interrogative tone. Like she wasn't asking necessarily. Also, it says Han was the dialect of Yong'an and the Central Plain, and it was and it's what most characters in the book speak. So majority of people here speak in the Han dialect. Good to know. Where was I? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm a heavenly official. This one here is my friend, Xie Lian replied. Campbell couldn't understand their words, but could tell they were fighting and demanded, What are you saying? The state preceptor looked Xie Lian over and eyed San Lang for a moment before quickly looking away. We never had heavenly officials visit before. I thought you all already abandoned this place. Xie Lian had expected that they would have to fight the state preceptor of Banwei, but was surprised to find her this despondent and devoid of any will to fight. She continued, Do you two want to leave? Of course we do, but there is an array set in the pit, so we can't, Xie Lian said. Hearing this, the state preceptor walked to one of the walls, raised her hand, and drew something. She then turned around and said, There, I released the array. You two can leave now. Dot, dot, dot? This was too easy. Xie Lian really didn't know what to say. Just then a voice called from above, Hey! Is anyone down there? If not, I'm leaving. It was Fu Yao's voice. Xie Lian heard San Lang next to him and immediately looked up. There was a shadow of a man looking down in the pit. Xie Lian shouted, Fu Yao! There are people down here. I'm down here. He waved and Fu Yao shouted back from above, You're actually down there? What's at the bottom beside you? A lot of things, dude. Why don't you come down and see for yourself? Xie Lian said. Fu Yao probably thought the same, and with a loud rumble, he hurled a large ball of fire into the pit. In an instant, the entire center's pit was lit up like day, and Xie Lian finally saw clearly the kind of place he'd been standing in. All around him were mountains of bloody corpses piled high, innumerably bodies of Banyu soldiers stacked on top of each other, faces and limbs blackened, dark blood smearing their bright armor. The corners where Xie Lian stood was the only spot in the entire center's pit that did not have a dead body. This was all done in a flash in the dark by San Lang after he jumped in. Xie Lian turned to gaze the youth next to him again. Before, in the dark, he vaguely saw that San Lang looked taller and subtly different in certain features, but now under the bright firelight, the one standing next to him was the same handsome youth he knew. When he saw Xie Lian looking over, he smiled. Xie Lian looked down to check his wrists and boots, and both were also the same as before, having nothing that would cause any jiggly sound. Just then, Xie Lian heard a muffled noise. It was the sound of Fu Yao jumping down. Weren't you looking after the merchants? Xie Lian asked. Having just entered the pit, Fu Yao wasn't yet used to the stench of blood and fanned his hand to make the air flow. He replied indifferently, We waited for 6 hours and there was still no sign of you guys, so we figured something probably happened. I drew a circle for them to wait in and came to check things out myself. Xie Lian frowned. The circle won't last long with you gone. What if they leave the circle thinking you left them behind? Fu Yao shrugged.
8 horses can't pull back a man who really wants to seek death. I can't stop stubborn people, so I won't try. What's with those two over there? Who's who? Fuya was on high alert, his guard raised against the two unknowns, but he soon discovered an astonishment that Camel was already heavily wounded on the ground, barely able to stand, and the state preceptor of Banwe was quiet, with her head hung low. That one is the general of Banyue, and the other is the state preceptor of Banyue, right? Now they're, well. Camel suddenly leapt up before Shilian could finish. He had been lying on the ground, gathering his strength, and was finally able to jump up with a shout, aiming his fist at the state preceptor of Banyue, a large beefy warrior attacking a little girl. Normally Shilian would never allow this sort of thing to happen before him, but Camel had every reason to hate the state preceptor, and she could defend herself perfectly well. However, she didn't, and allowed herself to be thrown around like a broken rag doll. Camel shouted at the state preceptor, where are your scorpion snakes? Come on, let them bite me to death too. Give me that release, the saber preceptor gloomily replied. Camel, my snakes don't listen to me anymore. Then why don't they kill you? He scoffed. I'm sorry, Camel, the saber preceptor apologized softly. Do you really hate us that much? The saber preceptor shook her head, and Camel became angrier. You're going to be the death of me. If you don't hate us, why did you betray us? You shameless spy, disguised mole traitor! Fuyao watched him strike harder and harder. The blows were all single-sided, and he couldn't help but frown. What are they saying? Shouldn't we stop them? Shilian couldn't watch anymore either and rushed toward to stop Camel. General, why don't you tell us who that young thug really is? And well, silently the saber preceptor seized his wrist. The grip was hard and came unexpectedly, and Shilian's heart dropped thinking she was going to attack him. But when he looked back down at her, the saber preceptor was on all fours on the ground. There was a small bruise at the corner of her mouth, and her head was raised, staring at him intensely. She didn't say a single word, but her dark eyes were intense with the fire of life. This demeanor overlapped with an image of a far-gone memory. After a pause, Shilian blurted, It's you? The state preceptor also called, General Hua! This back and forth stunned everyone in the pit. Fu Yao rushed forward, knocked Camel out with a punch, and demanded, You two know each other? Shilian didn't have the time to answer him. However, he knelt down, gripped the shoulder of the state preceptor, and examined her face. They'd been standing too far apart before, and he couldn't see clearly. Plus, it had been over 200 years. The girl had matured in that time, and for many reasons he hadn't recognized her at first, okay? But now that he looked again properly, it was the same face from his memories. So Liang couldn't speak but for the longest time, and it was a good moment before he sighed. Banyue? The same preceptor quickly clenched at his sleeves, surprisingly a little excited. It's me, General Hua. Do you still remember me? Of course I remember you, but Julian gazed at her for a moment and sighed. But what have you done to yourself? When she heard that, when she heard that, the state preceptor's eyes suddenly filled with pain. I'm sorry, Captain. I messed up, she muttered. In that exchange there was general this, captain that, making it glaringly obvious to the bystanders. Fu Yao was dumbstruck. Captain? General? You? How did this happen? Then the tomb of the general is. Wait a minute. Something nodded. Yeah, it's my tomb. Didn't you say you only came to collect scraps 200 years ago? Fuyao questioned. This, it's a long story. That was originally the plan. Shilian answered. Around 200 years ago, due to certain reasons, Shilian couldn't muck around in the east anymore and decided to stay out, for a while. He had planned to cross the Qing Ridge and head to the south to start a brand new life of scraps. Thus, he took up his compass and walked southward.
But the more he walked, the more he thought woefully, why was the scenery all wrong? There should have been abundance of trees and greenery, cities and life, so how come his path was becoming more desolate? However, Xie Lian pushed his suspicions aside and stubbornly continued. He walked and walked and walked and came upon the Gobi Desert. It took a gust of wind blowing a fistful of sand into his face for Xie Lian to finally realize that his compass had long been broken. The direction it guided him that entire journey was wrong. Since there wasn't anything he could do about the whole thing, he thought that he might as well, take his chance to visit the desert scenery. So he continued onwards. The only difference was that he changed courses slightly at the time, at the last minute for a destination to the northwest, and finally arrived in the border where he temporarily settled near the kingdom of Banyue. At first, it was just collecting scraps or something in the area, Xie Lian said, but the border was troubled and with so many, you know, skirmishes, there was often runaway soldiers, so the army would draft anyone to make up the numbers. So you were forced into the army? Sunland said. Yeah, Xie Lian replied, but don't doing anything was more or less the same, so it didn't really matter to me. And then, after chasing away some bandits a couple of times, I somehow got promoted to captain. The ones who gave me face they would call me general too, so yeah. Why does she call you General Hua? Fuyao questioned. Your surname isn't Hua. Xie Lian waved his hand and said dismissively, Don't worry about it. I randomly make up a fake name at the time. I think it was Hua Xie. Hearing the name, Sunling's face changed slightly. His lips fainted twitchily. Xie Lian didn't notice and continued. With the, battle-torn border came many orphans. When I was free, I played with them sometimes. One of them, was named Banwei. When there were bandits, Xie Lian was surely the bravest soldier, and no one dared block his way. No one even dared to stand beside him. But when there weren't, but when there weren't, it was as if anyone could order him around. One day, he went and sat by a wall to start a campfire using his own helmet to cook. As he cooked, the smell of it drifted out, and an enemy soldier came and kicked over whether it was the cooking. Xu Lian picked up his helmet with a broken heart. But when he looked back, he saw a small, disheveled, grimy child crouched behind him. She was picking up the stuff knocked to the ground with her hands and stuffing it into her mouth, without caring whether it was too hot. He was shocked. Don't wait, little kid, you! As expected, the little kid scarfed down a few lumps of the stuff she had picked up off the ground, and then dry heaved, harshly crying. A new victim of Xie Lian's terrible cooking. Rip, child. Xie Lian was so shaken that he picked her up upside down and ran laps until all the stuff she ate came back up. After that was done, he crouched down and whipped her sweat. Are you alright, little one? I'm so sorry, but don't ever tell your parents about this. And next time, don't pick up any more random stuff off the ground to eat. Wait, what are you doing now? The child's face was covered in tears, but she still went to pick food off the ground again, wanting to eat. It was only after Xie Lian grabbed her that he realized that the skin of the child's stomach was practically pressed to the black of her bones. When people were starved to that point, anything could be eaten. Even if it was disgusting to the point of tears, she would still eat it. Xie Lian had no choice and went to get her the last of his rations. After the incident, he would often see the child stalking him in the shadows nearby. In his memories, the little girl Banyue was always gloomy. Her body and face were covered in bruises, and when she looked at him, she would clutch the hem of her clothes and stare at him
just from below, because slightly she was singled out by the children of the Banyue kingdom besides Xie Lian. Only a practical Yong'an boy living at the border would sometimes pay attention to her. She spent her days tagging along behind the two of them. She rarely spoke, but she was fluent in the Han dialect, so Xie Lian didn't know where she came from. But she was a random wandering child, so he randomly took her in. When he was free, sometimes he'd teach her songs, sometimes wrestle, sometimes show off his busker moves, shattering boulders on one's chest, and other stuff, and they got along quite well. Julian shook his head. I thought the Banyue in the state preceptor title was the country. I didn't realize it was actually the name of the state preceptor. And then it's pretty much the same as what the memorial wrote, Julian said. After some silence, Sang Lang spoke up. The memorial said you died, though. As for the memorial, Shilian was extremely bummed out. Weren't memorial usually full of praises and exaggerated good deeds to glorify the deceased? All those mentions of his demotion aside, why did they have to so seriously record the embarrassing way he died? Well, they were hiding away from the sandstorm, and he read to his part, he could barely look at it straight on. If it wasn't for San Lang, who also understood Banyue's script and was watching him, he would have pretended that section never existed. Having something like that written down, even if he wanted to laugh at it, never mind other people, and he didn't even have the nerve to ask those seeking shelter in his memorial not to laugh, as they commented and joked about his epitaph. That made him feel really bummed. Shizyan's forehead was becoming red from all the rubbing. Oh, yeah, of course I didn't die. I faked it. Fu Yao had a face full of disbelief. Xie Lian explained himself. I got trampled too hard and couldn't get up, so there wasn't any option besides faking my death. Truthfully, Xie Lian couldn't quite remember exactly how he died, nor what that battle broke out in the first place, only that it was over something petty. He really hadn't wanted to fight, and victory of defeat was meaningless, but by then his rank could go no lower, go, but by then his rank could go no lower, and no one would listen to him. In the midst of the battle, everyone saw red, okay? So when he rushed out and both sides saw it was him, for some reason all the blades and swords went after him and cut him down. Fu Yao questioned, you must have been standing in the middle being an eyesore, and that's raised the ire of both sides, right? Otherwise, why would people cut you down on sight? Besides, I'm sure you knew there were many who hated you. So why didn't you avoid them? Why did you have to charge in? I'm sure you could have avoided the whole thing if you really wanted to. I really don't remember at all, Shilian said. Even if nothing could kill him, he still couldn't endure that kind of butchering. So, with the thought, this can't go on, Shilian he resortedly dropped to the ground to fake his death. But even and I quote, death, he was trampled to the point of passing out. It was water choking him that roused him, because corpses were usually thrown into the rivers after battles. Shilian went with the river's flow and floated back to the kingdom of Yong'an like a heap of junk. Afterwards, he took several years to recover from his wounds, then picked up an unbroken compass to start off anew, and finally made it to his original destination in the south. He then stopped paying attention to what went on in the kingdom of Banyue. I'm sorry, Banyue muttered again. Fu Yao furrowed his brow. Why did she keep apologizing to you? Silence suddenly spoke up. Kimmel stated that the state preceptor of Banwei left the Central Plains after a clash between the two armies. Were you involved in that? With the reminder and recalling what was written on the memorial, some things were coming back to Shilian, though only in bits and pieces. Maybe it was to save me, Banjue said. Everyone turned to look at her, and she said softly, General Hua got flattened because he entered the fray to save me. Dot dot dot. Xie Lian instantly remembered the agony of being trampled by thousands, and he hugged his body despite himself. But he saw two others watching him with unreadable expressions. He pulled himself back in a hurry. He said, "Not flat. Okay, well, not too flat. Flat." Who knew why Fu Yao was looking so smug? He said passive aggressively, "Well, aren't you a saint?" Xie Lian waved dismissively. "Nothing of that sort. I don't remember the specifics anymore. But there were two children playing at the time, and I was just going to pick them up and run away immediately. But, we didn't manage to retreat fast enough and got caught between the two armies." "If that's the case," Fuyao demanded, "how can you now remember something like that?" Celia replied, "Do you not know how many hundreds of years old I am? So much can happen in just a decade. There's no way to remember everything in detail. Besides, some things are better forgotten, okay? Rather than remembering how I was butchered and trampled hundreds of years ago, I'd prefer to remember that I ate a delicious meat bun yesterday. No? I'm sorry." Banwei said. Shilian sighed. "Oh, Banwei, saving you was my own choice. You're not at fault. If you're going to apologize, perhaps it should be to others." Banwei was taken aback and hugged her head in silence. Shilian continued. "But maybe it's because my impression of you is from 200 years ago. But I don't think you're that kind of child who'd seek revenge and betray others. Will you tell me what happened exactly? Why did you open the city gates?" Banyue contemplated, shook her head, and remained silent. "Then why did you let the snakes out of the pit to bite people?" Shilian asked. This time Manyu answered, "I didn't release the snakes." Shilian was taken aback. "What?" "I didn't release the snakes," Manyu repeated. "They ran off on their own. I don't know why, but they don't listen to me anymore." Hearing this, Fu Yao grew impatient. Manyu pleaded, "General Huang, I'm not lying." Before Shilian responded, Fu Yao cut in rudely. "Anyone would say that after being captured, even if you say it wasn't intentional. I heard all that before. All those people crossing the paths were clearly injured by your snakes. Show me your hand. You're under arrest." Ban Yue shut up and extended both hands. Fu Yao immediately took out an immortal binding rope and apprehended both Ban Yue and Camel. Then he said, "All right, we've accomplished our goal for this trip. It's all over now." Just then, San Lang spoke up. She had no reason to lie. Shilian also felt like there was a need to further interrogate. There was more interrogation needed. Eh, eh. He turned to Manwë. "Can you not control any of your snakes?" Manwë answered, "I can control them, and they'll obey most of the time, but there are times when they won't eat. I don't know. I don't know why." After some thought, Chilean said, "Why don't you call them out and show us?" Manwë was kneeling before him. Now she finally rose to her feet and nodded. Soon a wine-red scorpion snake slithered out from underneath the corpse. It raised its head and curled itself in a pile of dead bodies. It soundlessly flickered its tongue to the group. Julian was about to take a closer look at the snake, but saw Manuel within her eyes. Face strange. Julian's heart dropped, and he thought, "Oh no." As that thought crossed his mind, the snake stopped flickering its tongue, opened its mouth, and pounced at him in attack. It was a sudden lunge, but Chilean was ready. He was about to grab for it, when boom! Something exploded. When he opened his eyes again to see, the snake was already in a splatter of guts on the ground. Having been thoroughly blown apart, it was a calculated blast too, since none of the venom of the snake, since none of the venom of the snake spilled. That's what I was trying to say. Chanel immediately remembered another time when a snake died like that before they entered the Banwei ruins, but there was no need to say who did it at this point. He hadn't even had the chance to look at Sanlang before a red sleeve flashed before him, bearing and separating him from Banwei. On the other side, Fuyao said coldly, "I knew she was lying. Did you think that snake would manage to bite under these circumstances? You fool!" Banye's face was already pale when she saw the snake, and when she heard him, her head shot out. "I didn't do it! I said there are some snakes that don't obey me, and that one was one of them just now." Fuyao didn't believe a single word. "Who knows whether it was disobeying or obeying you? That one wasn't even called forth by me," Banwei said glumly. Xie Lian was about to speak when another two wine-red scorpion snakes pounded out from under a different corpse, flicking their tongues and watching them intensely. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. From the mountain of dead bodies and every corner of the pit there came innumerable scorpion snakes. Uh-oh. Everyone stared at Ban Yue, who was kneeling at the top of a pile of corpses, and Fu Yao stared, spinning a ball of spiritual energy in his palm. Spinning a ball of energy, of spirit. This is Christ. Can I read? And Fu Yao started spinning a ball of spiritual energy in his palm and shouted at her, "Make them go away! They can't all disobey!" Ban Yue scrunched up her brows, looking as if she was trying to drive them out. Yet more and more scorpion snakes appeared, curling and crawling, slithering even closer. Bites from one or two snakes might not kill them, but 200s or hundreds or thousands was harder to say. Even if they didn't die, it wouldn't be pretty. Xie Lian raised his wrist, about to call forth Roye, but saw that when the snakes slithered to a certain distance, they would stop and hesitate, forming a weird circle. It dawned on Xie Lian, and he glanced at Sanlang next to him. He was watching the snakes with condescension and immense contempt. The scorpion snake seemed to be able to read his eyes and didn't dare approach. They backed off a bit by bit, lowering their heads, and they did so pressing their savage heads against the ground submissively like servants. But there seemed to be another power controlling them, not allowing them to abandon their attacks and leave completely. Thus, many of the snakes turned around and slithered towards Fu Yao. Fu Yao swung his hands, and a blast of flames burst from his sleeves, killing a circle of snakes and forcing back another. That wouldn't last long. However, Xie Lian said, "Let's get out of here first." Whoosh! Roye shot out from Xie Lian's arm and flew upwards, but a moment later, another whoosh and it was back on Xie Lian's arm. Xie Lian was slightly taken aback and raised his wrist, slowly the silk band now wrapped around it. "What are you doing back here? The array was released. There's nothing stopping you anymore. Hurry and go!" But Roye remained wrapped around his arm, trembling as if it had bumped into something terrifying at the top. Shilgen was about to coax it some more, when suddenly a long rope of something fell. Plap! It dropped on Fuyao's shoulder. Fuyao went to grab it, and his face changed the moment he brought it before his eyes. It was another scorpion snake that fell off from the sky. This caught Fu Yao off guard, and after getting bitten, he hurried the snake towards Ban Yue. Even with her hands tied, she still reflexively tried to catch the snakes, and after having caught it, the dark red snake curled itself up and around her arm without attacking. Just then, another plop, and then a second scorpion snake landed on the ground. Xilian could guess why Roger refused to go up now. Borrowing the faint light of the moon, Xilian raised his head and only just barely saw the sight. Hundreds of little white and red dots were falling rapidly into the sinner's pit. A snake deluge, if you will. The red dots were coming closer. Xie Lian yelled, Fuyao, fire! Shoot a stream of fire upwards and get rid of them while they're still in the air. Fuyao bit his palm to break the skin, swung his hand, and a series of blood drops shot out, and an instant later they transformed into a screen of fire that jutted up through the pit. Those sweeping flames rose over 30 meters and hung in midair, des- des- disintegrating all scorpion snakes that touched them, burning them to ash, dissolving the snakes' deluge. Temporarily safe, Xie Lian let out a breath of relief. That was good, Fuyao. Thank goodness for you. A spell like that evidently consumed an immense amount of spiritual power, and after one round, Fuyao's face was pale. He turned around and ignited a ring of fire, dispelling the snakes on the ground, and shouted at Banyue, And you say those snakes don't obey you? If you weren't controlling them, why wouldn't they attack you? Someone laughed. Maybe it's because of your bad luck. They didn't attack us either. Fuyao turned to look at him, his eyes sharp and narrow. Xie Lian could sense trouble. He somewhat established a theory. Well, he somewhat established a theory about the current situation, but hadn't yet had time to sort through his thoughts, and Xie Lian didn't want to see the two of them start fighting now. Let's figure out what's going on with those snakes first, Xie Lian said. Let's charge out. Fuyao sneered. What's going on? Either the state preceptor or Banyue is lying, or the one next to you is causing trouble. Xie Lian glanced at Banyue, then at San Lang, and said, I don't think it's either of them. His tone was gentle but firm. It was the conclusion he came to after much thought. However, Fu Yao must have thought he was shielding them intentionally, and the face illuminated by the flames was unkind. Chen Lian thought, well, he couldn't tell if he was angry or laughing. Your Royal Highness, Fuyao said, don't play pretend when you know the truth. Don't you still remember your place? I'm sure you already were aware of who exactly that cat next to you is. I refuse to believe you haven't realized it. And that is the end of chapter 9. Holy cow, that is the longest chapter of this entire book. The rest of the chapters that are missing is chapter 10 and 11, and they're a lot shorter. But holy cow, it took me 2 days to finish this. One chapter, but yes. Also, by the time I finish reading this, I have 100 subscribers. Yay! I want to say thank you to all of you for following along. Pero yeah, I have 100 subscribers. I'm officially famous. Just kidding. Pero yeah, thank you to all. This video is really, 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 really long. If you guys are still here listening, I want to say thank you for sticking along. And yeah, I hope you have a good day, night, wherever you are, however you are. We are finishing the book, so yeah. Hope you guys been liking it. Like, comment, and subscribe. And bye.